Hello, everyone. I'm Jon Brinton, Chief Revenue Officer at Crexendo, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar on the path to profitability, transforming telecom economics for the next generation of service providers. I'm joined today by two great guys I've had the pleasure of working with in our industry, Chris Wager, the Director of Sales at Vox Matic, and Jon Joseph, the Director of Product Development at Vox Matic. And we're going to talk today about the path to profitability for service providers. If you are a service provider that does any hosted voice services or contemplating adding hosted voice services, and if you, as we see in many cases in our industry, host customers across multiple platforms, today's content is designed for you. It's really focused on helping you to grow your profitability quickly by accelerating one of the most challenging problems that we have in our industry, which is that migration from a legacy platform to a modern platform, and expand your gross margins significantly, leveraging sessions, not seats, in the NetSapiens model. So, Chris, Jon, welcome. Glad to have you guys here today.
Thanks, Jon.
Thanks, Jon.
Yeah. So, before we get started, service providers are our intended audience. They're always looking for ways to be more profitable. Chris, how can they be more profitable by transferring their customers to the NetSapiens platform?
Yeah, it's interesting, Jon, the benefits, and you're going to talk about this a little bit later on, but of the sessions versus seats model, right? I mean, that is where NetSapiens really does truly shine in monthly revenue. So likely you've done a cap and grow. If you're with NetSapiens now, you've done a cap and grow in the past because there really was not an easy way to migrate those lines, those legacy lines, over to NetSapiens. I mean, you love the NetSapiens platform for multiple reasons. I mean, one of them being that less expensive sessions model. Well, now you have an option to easily migrate those legacy platform users over to a more profitable platform like NetSapiens. I mean, was anybody at UGM? Have you talked to John Almond or Trent lately? All of the new technology that's coming out that you can use in this NetSapiens platform is just really exciting. Unfortunately, you can't utilize any of that either when you're using your legacy platforms. I have a quick question for you, Jon. I think you're going to talk about it in a little bit, but can you tell us a couple reasons why people are liking and loving the technology aspect, not just the profitability aspect, but why are people moving over to NetSapiens right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. And hey, surprisingly, I have a slide to answer that. So here's some of the things, and it's not just, the technology aspect of it. And Chris referenced our user group meeting, which we had a couple months ago, which we had 60 plus vendors in our ecosystem who built applications or things to augment and enhance our platform. Plus, many of our partners use our APIs to build their own applications on our platform. We had several AI applications demonstrated and that people had built and shown, just leveraging the power of that open platform and a rich set of APIs on the NetSapiens platform. But what we're finding is there's a lot of service providers that have legacy technology, legacy voice platforms that they invested in the past. And some of those names may come up in the course of this conversation. But the fact is that, they've got some legacy technology that's not getting investment, or they're in kind of a user-based pricing model that, doesn't give them the really owner's economics, I call it, that you would get with a platform like the NetSapiens platform and our sessions, not seats model. And then they're also being forced to, vendor-sponsored hosting programs or hosting requirements that really they lose control of. So what we see is the four key differentiators of the NetSapiens platform, kind of if you drill it down to, why people with some legacy soft switches have chose to migrate to NetSapiens. It is our sessions, not seats-based pricing. And later in this session, I'm going to show you some examples of just the expansion in gross margin with the NetSapiens platform. It's that we give our partners a choice We do still believe in software ownership. So if they want to purchase our platform, we support a perpetual license purchase model. If they want to just subscribe to it and pay as on a use basis or as they grow, they can do that as well. I often feel like that most companies have a financial plan or a financial model that they prefer for assets that they're deploying in their business. And so we don't want to tell them, no, you can only buy this on a subscription basis, because there are many companies out there, especially in the service provider industry, that prefer a financial model where they own assets, put them on their books, depreciate them over time. And really, that's where you get to your lowest total cost of ownership. We still give people choice in how they deploy the NetSapiens platform. So they can deploy it in their own cloud or their own infrastructure. And many service providers have core competencies around doing that. They have teams that do that and manage and support their own offerings. Or if they want to press the easy button, we have a partnership with Oracle Cloud Infrastructure and have deployed many of our partners in an OCI environment. And we also support hybrid deployments that helps our partners that maybe are facilities based and deploy on their own, expand their reach so that they can expand into new markets, new territories, or shift their asset strategy over time when it comes to hosting. And then the thing I started with is those rich, robust APIs and an awesome ecosystem of companies like Vox Matic that are part of our ecosystem partner program, that have solutions that are built for our community. So they have ready-made solutions that really help our partners accelerate faster. And in aggregate, our partners are growing at double the rate of the market. They continue to grow at double the rate of the market and have for a number of years. So these are some of our advantages. But Chris, I'm always challenged because I know you and Jon kind of look at this, from your perspective, is that, we can show the model to people. They can understand what the path to profitability is. Why do you think more companies choose to stick with a cap and grow model and not migrate their base?
Yeah. And I think the reality is it's really hard, Jon, right? I mean, if you've ever done a manual migration before, it's not something you really ever want to do again. I'm sure you've been sitting in a meeting, and if you say, hey, we're going to manually migrate our 10,000 lines over, everyone's just going to get up and walk out. It's like there's not enough pizza parties you can throw to make this fun. So I think the first thing is just really hard. The next is, I'm sure there's some fear in there. I mean, hey, listen, people will say, hey, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Hey, we're good in our legacy platform. We've been building it. It works. But maybe there's some fear of churn or customer disruption. Those are all things that are real fears out there. It's interesting. We were talking before, Jon, and one of the current challenges that is happening in the workforce right now is skilled workforce shortage, right? So those skilled workers that you have, there's a shortage of those. And when you're trying to teach someone the depth that it needs to have, or the depth of knowledge you need to have on both a legacy platform and a new platform, plus let alone the time that it takes to actually migrate. I mean, if you think one person migrating 10,000 lines, right? One person, if they work 40 hours a week with no Thanksgiving and no Christmas and no PTO, no sick time, it's going to take them over a year to migrate those lines. So it's a big, long, arduous process. And it's just not feasible for many companies. Also, you don't want to run two platforms. That's because of cost, the knowledge it takes to run both platforms at the same time. You really want to streamline those operations and support. So there's a lot of reasons why they don't want to migrate. And that's what we're here to do. So, we're an automated migration solution. We help you migrate from tangled, outdated legacy platforms with effortless automation. It's that simple, Jon.
That's great. And I think that's a great value statement, because you guys, as a smaller company and newer, many people in our audience may not be familiar with Vox Matic. So if anybody needs to understand the Vox Matic value prop, it's there in that slide, and we'll talk through it some in this. But Chris talked a little bit about kind of what service providers are dealing with. If you're providing legacy voice services, there's platforms out there. Many of them are, legacy technology. People have aging infrastructure. Development has really ceased There's some, been some mergers and acquisitions in our business where there's promise of future development, but not on the platform that people already have. It's on another platform, and we're going to connect those in the sky and our intelligent communications fabric, or whatever we want to call it, and it'll all be good. And that's, I think, causes concern for, a lot of service providers. Regulatory and compliance in our industry is changing rapidly. And if your technology partner is not keeping up with that, that's a challenge. And then you talked about it. There's really three. These are like all of the challenges that service providers have. I think this webinar really hits the two or three of them a little bit more, which you talked about: the legacy technology migration, the skilled workforce shortage. If I have had the software platform for 10 or 20 years, we see more and more, in some of the communities that are out there for service providers, the technicians that have operated those, they're getting close to retirement. And many of them are retiring out. And you don't want to take younger workers and teach them a language that they don't understand with some outdated legacy technology. And then the fifth one, or the number 5 on the chart, we'll focus in on as well, is this managing multi-platform environments, just how challenging it is to manage, if you're going to make a change to certain customers or platforms, that you have your employees managing customers on 2 or 3 different platforms. It's like, a restaurant chain, and you have the same employees working in 2 or 3 different kitchens at the same time with different menus, different formulas, different strategies. So, today's content is really designed for the current voice services providers that are struggling with all these challenges, but the 3 that we've highlighted here is really being the most specific. So, Jon, before we kind of dive in deeper, what is the process for a Vox Matic migration? When you talk about that, what does it really mean?
Yeah, so I mean, we're entering warp speed, Jon, right? So let's get it going here. So, what we do is we actually create what we call a snowflake for each migration path, right? So we know that each customer is unique, and we ensure proper mapping from your legacy platform over to your NetSapiens platform. So this setup, pre-migration prep, helps us be successful when we're doing the actual migration. So we test through the different workflows. We ensure there's a high quality migration tool that acts with precision. So it's reliable. It migrates all critical data over, and for an overall better experience for anyone who's doing the migrations, right? So it's much quicker, and it's a high quality tool, again, with precision. So we're able to get all your legacy platform lines moved over to NetSapien quickly and easily. So I'll ask JJ, who's our product development expert here. So JJ, dive in a little bit and tell us a little bit more about how this actually works. So when you're migrating the customers, what factors determine whether a service provider should choose a customer by customer approach or like a bulk approach?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. When we do migrations, we actually offer kind of multiple options here, right? And that's chosen when you create a new migration. You actually get to pick. So you can go customer by customer. Typically that's your business environment, where you want to do a little more, hand holding, white glove service, that type of thing, when you want to migrate your business customers. But if you get comfortable with that, or if you have a different model, we can actually do, bulk, high speed, we call them broker migrations, where our backend services kind of manage that process for you. So our infrastructure is built to scale. So if you run a broker migration and there's 20,000 lines in there, we'll just churn through the whole thing and we'll keep it going until the end. So we can actually migrate the whole thing overnight.
Wow.
I can't believe
so that's your example of warp speed, huh, JJ?
Yeah, I guess that would be considered warp speed. Yeah.
Yep. So JJ, another question we get a lot, which is device migration can be one of the most complex aspects, right? So especially if you don't have full control over the phone. So how does Vox Matic handle scenarios where service providers have limited access to devices?
Yeah, those pesky devices, they're always out there on their own. That we take, we call it our snowflake approach, right? So the devices in the field, we can actually integrate with the manufacturer's APIs. And what we do is when that customer migrates with that list of devices, we'll reach out to the manufacturer and update the default provisioning for that particular phone. Once that phone resets, when it comes back up, it'll recognize it's got a new address and it'll point over to the new NetSapiens platform and get its config automatically.
Wow. So I think one of the side benefits of that is it's probably easier with our platform because we've independently verified that we natively support more devices than any other hosted platform. So what you're saying, JJ, is I have a phone that's sitting here, maybe going to my legacy platform, and you guys actually connected the phone, have it sent to be reprovisioned, and reprovision it to its new home at the same time that you've migrated all the customer data over. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah, we leave that step for last, right? Usually the device portion is kind of right at the last, like let's flip the switch. So we save that for the end. Once the device or once the data is all over, that's when we can migrate the device.
So how does the Vox Matic automation handle kind of the data conversion? Because we may store data slightly different than their legacy platform did, or in a slightly different format, and then the reprovisioning at scale. And what safeguards kind of ensure the viability and the safety of these bulk migrations?
Yeah, no, good question. So we use, we're primarily just APIs. Don't send me your old backup, please, from 10 years ago in some crazy format. We'll reach out to your platform in real time, right? So we'll get the configuration as it is right in that moment. We'll collect all that information, we'll store it in that format, and then we actually convert it separately on its own into the new destination format. And that's when we do the actual build portion. When we're migrating the customer, back when I started in this industry, I started doing manual migrations and it was terrible. So when we kind of went down this path of an automated migration, we made sure that every customer we migrate, we are gathering the entire call flow of the customer, right? So even when somebody configured some odd button 10 years ago that's saved on extension 1000's phone, we'll reach out and we'll grab that instance on Tuesdays at 3 o'clock, forward to somebody's cell phone, right? We can retrieve that information, convert it to the new format, and actually build it on NetSapiens in the exact same way. The whole intention is, make sure that the data that comes over, it's mapped exactly as it was. The phones look identical or as identical as possible. And the customer disruption is near zero, right? No customer wants to come in and try and learn a whole new phone system. They just want to come in and their calls work the same way they did yesterday.
Sure. Yeah. And what data actually migrates over?
Right. So whole call flow, the users, any business groups or service providers, if you're talking a BroadSoft or a Metaswitch, the numbers, the devices, the line key buttons, any configured services like, call forwarding, that Tuesday at 3 o'clock, right? That call forwarding gets pulled over. Your voicemail configuration, your auto attendance, your button presses, your audio files, right? Anything that makes your customer unique, their setup that you poured all that time into when you built that customer years ago, all that comes back out and gets mapped over.
And you, just to double click on that, you mentioned BroadSoft and Metaswitch. So Vox Matic has already done successful migrations from both BroadSoft and Metaswitch to the NetSapiens platform, correct?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, interesting. Good. Okay.
All right, so Jon, we kind of move into the actual path to profit, right? So I have a question for you, Jon, before we kind of get started in this. It's going to talk about ROI, because that's always like a big topic of concern here, right? And you being a CRO of a big company, when people bring you projects, software, hardware, et cetera, what's a nice ROI timeline that you like to see?
Yeah, so that's interesting question, because I just came out of a meeting where we were considering a large budget allocation for next year. And like personally, barring any, obviously with revenue in my title, the impact of growing revenue, which changes this picture. But if it is to something that's an installed base or business process or something we're doing. I generally want to see it be cash flow positive in the first year and make sure we're on a path to profitability before we exit that first year, so that, you know, we budget in an annual basis with a 2-year look forward. So, you know, you have to think in most companies' time frame, what is their view of when they want to see that performance from that kind of project. But that gives you an idea. You know, make it cash flow positive this year, make it profitable by the end of this year, so we're reaping the rewards of that and having those rewards continue to grow and expand the next year.
Yeah, and that's right on for what we hear from just about everybody, is that same timeline, right? So it's interesting when we talk about these migrations now, whether you do a migration manually and you have your team do it, or whether you have Vox Matic do your migration, there's going to be a cost to that, right? So you're going to have to pay staff to do it, and that takes time, or whether you pay us to do it and it takes a little bit quicker. I think the biggest thing to think about when you think about ROI, I want to give you a micro look at our ROI. So when you break this down to a micro level, now I'm going to talk about the macro level next, but on the micro level, each line to migrate is about $6 to $7. So each line is about $6 to $7 to migrate. Everyone that we've talked to, when you're moving from a legacy platform over to NetSapiens, you're going to increase your margin by about $2 to $4.50 per month per line. Okay. So worst case scenario, if you're just increasing your revenue by $2 per line and it costs you $6.50 to migrate, it takes you just over 3 months to recoup that. And then after that, it's compounding for you, right? And so really our ROI to kind of make back the investment on each line is, at worst case, just over 3 months. At best case, it's a month and a half. So that's kind of like a micro look at this. Let's take a look at this at scale now, right, Jon? So let's take a look at a manual migration. I'm going to do a big migration, a medium, and then a smaller migration. Let's start with a bigger one, which would be a 20,000 line migration. You've got 20,000 lines on Meta, on Broad, somewhere that you want migrated over to the NetSapiens platform. We figure that if you have one person working on this, they can migrate about 5 lines per hour. So that would put your monthly labor costs, if you've got one person working on this, 40 hours a week, about $7,200. And again, your savings per line is going to be anywhere between $2 and about $4.50 per line. We kind of cut it down the middle. We had your savings per line at $3. So if one person works on this 20,000 lines at 5 lines an hour, it's going to take you over 2 years to migrate. And this is perfect world. This is no PTO, no sick days, no mistakes. A lot of times, if you have a bigger company, you may have a team. We'll say, well, you know, we'll put our team on it. Or, you know, I would say, where does the migration fit in the list of things that are important? We talked about the skilled workforce shortage earlier. And a lot of times the migration kind of falls to the bottom, and we'll work on it when we get to it. And the reality is getting to it is difficult, right? So if it takes you 28 months to get it done, best case scenario, that would put your total labor cost at just over $200,000. So again, there is a cost to this, right? There's no snowflake fee because that's the Vox Matic side, but over 2 years, you're going to incur some additional legacy maintenance fees, right? So you're paying those maintenance fees every year. They'll become less as you migrate lines off. But we anticipate, just as a good guesstimate, about $158,000 in those maintenance fees. Now, as you migrate lines over, here's the good news. You are more profitable by $3 per line. So over 28 months, when you migrate it over, you're going to make an extra $842,000, which means your ROI after 28 months is $482,000. So that's not too bad, you know, but again, you're taxing your team. And who's actually going to do the migrations? No one really wants to do it. Let's take a look at a Vox Matic migration and kind of how we can get this done for you. Lines per hour, we don't really calculate it by lines per hour because we kind of do these bulk migrations. So there's not really a way to do a lines per hour. You will have someone on your team that's going to have to click through the migration process and use our migration tool, but that will save you over 95% of the time from a manual migration. So we just wanted to be fair. Yes, someone will have to kind of use the tool that we have, and it will take a little bit of time. Your savings will be the same at $3 per line. Your months to get this done, it goes from 28 months. We put in 11 months as a very fair timeline for 20,000 lines. This all depends on your schedule. You know, Jon talked about the flexibility of the NetSapiens platform earlier. we are also very flexible with you. So you guys kind of run your migrations. You have business customers and you need to set up time for them, et cetera. You can run it as fast or slow as you want. One thing I guarantee you is we will not slow you down. If you have residential lines, we can do tens of thousands of those overnight for you. That's not a problem. So that's the easy part. So your labor cost is going to be obviously much less. Here's the big question. How much does it cost? How much does it cost me to pay Vox Matic, right? So the good news is it's not millions of dollars, right? We're going to charge you on a 20,000 line migration, $120,000 is the full cost, right? You will still have some legacy maintenance fees if it takes 11 months, likely, but they will be minimal as we're migrating you off. The good news is your total line savings are going to be more because we're migrating faster. So that compounding of those extra $3 per month is going to be happening faster for you. So your ROI after 28 months, it is not $482,000, John. It is now over $1.1 million. That's after 2 years. So, John talked about, hey, I would like to be cash flow positive after 12 months, or at least have a path to that profitably after 12 months. When we're doing these migrations, again, 3-4 months, you're in profit. And you go, Chris, $3 a line isn't that much. When you look at it at scale over 20,000 lines, et cetera, this is where it really adds up for you. You might say, hey, Chris, I don't have 20,000 lines, right? I have less than that. John, let's take a look at more of a medium-sized migration. Here's a 10,000 line migration. Now, your lines per hour, your monthly cost, those are all going to stay the same. But since there's less lines, you can get it done in less time. Again, this will take about 14 months to migrate. The biggest question I have for you is who on your team is going to do it, right? Who on your team? You're a more medium-sized company. You probably don't have one person you can dedicate. Again, it's a team. It's going to be a team effect. And 14 months is best case scenario, 40 hours a week.
Don't you find, Chris, sometimes this is the classic in the classic manual migration for a lot, especially in these smaller to medium-sized companies. The people that get to do this, it's like their third job, right? Yeah. So they've got a core job they got to do every day, and they've got this long-term project, and that's probably why you guys factor the time that it takes to migrate, because it's like the third thing they're focused on.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right, because they're not doing this first thing Monday morning and they're cranking it out all day. This is like, oh, shoot, it's Thursday and I was supposed to get some lines done. I got to be here until midnight knocking these out. Or, oh, hey, we've got a deadline to hit, our first 1,000 lines migrated by, the 15th. And now it's like all hands on deck over the weekend to get it done, right? To try and stay on whatever schedule that they put forth, right? Or worst case, they're going to their boss going, we can't get it done. We just have too many other things to do. So now this project just gets pushed and pushed and pushed. We've talked to a lot of people like that. They want to do it. They just can't find the time.
Right. So show us the warp speed example here.
Warp speed example is, your ROI at 14 months is just under 80,000. Here's what it's going to cost you to do it with Vox Matic. It's going to take much less time. Again, 7 months plus or minus. We can probably get it done in less time than that. Just depends on your schedule. Your labor cost is much less. Your snowflake fee in a 10,000 line migration, John, is $65,000. We can normally beat your legacy maintenance fees depending on when they're due, so we don't have any in there. Again, that compounding dollars is going to happen faster because we're migrating faster at $345,000. So, John, your ROI at 14 months, it's not $79,000. It's now $277,000. That's on 10,000 lines. I would like to see that on my books. I don't know about you, John, right? So,
sure.
Let's take a look at just a smaller one. Yeah.
3.5x in less than a year and just doing it that way. That's awesome.
That's not bad, right? So let's just take a look at a smaller one. You go, I don't have that many lines. Can I be profitable doing it this way? I mean, the answer is yes. We take everything into consideration still with your labor costs. Now your ROI at 8 months manually is 0. So you're breaking even, which, hey, you're still within where you wanted to be at 12 months. But let's take a look at a Vox Matic migration at 5,000 lines. We can do this one faster than you can imagine, right? So again, it's on a 5,000 line migration, your cost to Vox Matic is going to be around $30,000. Your line savings is $87,000 because we're getting it done faster. And now your ROI at 8 months is not 0. It's $55,000 at 8 months. And again, after that 8 months, those 5,000 lines every month are just more profitable every month for here on out.
And besides the cost savings we talked about, they're taking complexity out of their business.
Yep.
They're standardizing on a modern platform that they can move forward with AI applications and things like that. So you're driving cost savings for a service provider, but also helping them modernize their technology stack. That's a great, there's intangibles that are not factored into the ROI you're showing here.
Yeah, those are soft costs, right? So no matter if you're a big company with tens of thousands of lines or a smaller setup that just has a couple of thousand lines, it's just that simple.
Yeah. So thank you for walking us through those examples. Let's look at what happens when you reach your end state, which is moving your base to the NetSapiens platform. We talked a little bit earlier about the sessions, not seats concept, but what that really means is oversubscription. So a lot of legacy platforms, they have individual user licenses. They actually have feature licenses, which cost more. Some of them do practice a concept called true up billing, which means that they allow you to provision licenses to customers throughout the year. And at the end of the year, they'll true up your usage across a lot of those feature lines. Some of the newer kind of more pure cloud-based providers only have a per user per month model, to where you're paying essentially what becomes a wholesale price to them to host it for you in the cloud. Well, the NetSapiens platform is built on this sessions, not seats model that we talk about, which really allows, and it's a universal license. So everything in the core platform is included in one cost. That one cost is driven on the cost price of a session, which is a usage channel. And so what we find is in today's environment, we have over 7 million users globally. Like I said, we're adding about 100,000 users a month across 200 plus service providers, and they're growing at double the rate of the market because there is this high level of oversubscription that can be achieved in this type of deployment with the NetSapiens platform across all user types. Standard oversubscription, which is about 40-1, which means one session generally supports about 40 provisioned end users. In a residential type of environment, which a lot of service providers have a mix of business and residential, the oversubscription rate is more like 100-1. And in a POTS replacement environment where you're talking about like fire alarms, fax machines, and that type of POTS service, a plain old telephone service that's going away as the carriers decommission that infrastructure, people reaching up to 200-1 oversubscription rate. So you can support thousands of customers with a few hundred sessions, pushing your costs and unlocking massive profit potential for you. And that's after you get to the benefit. So you've got a base that you're paying these type of incremental feature licenses for. We talked about, you've migrated that base with Vox Matic, and now you're completely operating on the NetSapiens platform in an oversubscription model. And this profitability just expands over time. And that's why we continue to see our partners growing at double the rate of the market, because you get a significant amount of operating leverage because you have true owner's economics in owning your own deployment of the NetSapiens platform. And you can see that your operating profit from year one doubles to year 4 and quadruples to year 8. And the chart on the right just shows you some examples of the power of oversubscription over time, which is really taking that base, migrating it to a single modern platform with robust applications and things that allow you to compete in a very competitive market, and then expanding your margins over time when you do that. So that's the benefit of once you've crossed the threshold with Vox Matic and you've completely moved your base to the NetSapiens platform. I'm not going to go into all of these benefits of the NetSapiens platform, but we'd love to talk to any service providers about those. And if you want to get more information there's different things here, obviously, for different service providers. Some may resonate more with others, but go back to that core sessions, not seats. Choose how you own the platform, choose how you deploy the platform, and then have the ability to deploy robust AI, CX, other types of applications, leveraging our APIs and our ecosystem. Mm-hmm. So if you want to find out more about the things that we've talked about today on our NetSapiens website, netsapiens.com, we have webinars, case studies. This webinar will be posted there for reference later so that you can revisit it and find out more. And you can access all of these assets that we have for you there. And we have several that are specifically talking about the multiple UC platform dilemma, this consolidation strategy, and why people are choosing the NetSapiens platform as their future base for their UCaaS offerings and their voice services offerings. If you want to find out more about Crexendo, NetSapiens, or Vox Matic, and just to be clear, in our case, the NetSapiens site is where you would find all the content that is specifically developed for service providers. There's my contact information there. I want to thank Chris and Jon for joining me today. Here's their contact information there. So anything that you'd want to find out about Vox Matic, these guys are experts, and they also are very customer focused, and really, because the concept of that snowflake, and I love that term. I think when Jon first developed it, it's because they customize a solution for your data as the service provider. Every service provider deployment's a little bit different, as Chris talked about and Jon talked about. Some of them have done different nuances over time. The concept of the snowflake is your legacy operating environment becomes that, and they're experts at helping to craft that and helping make you feel comfortable about how that migration can work for you. So thank you, Chris. Thank you, Jon. It's a pleasure having you guys on the webinar today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jon. Have a great one.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. And for our audience, thank you for joining us, and look for more podcasts and webinars in this series where we talk to NetSapiens ecosystem partners and talk about how they can help you be more competitive in a highly competitive market and earn more gross revenue, more gross margin, and more revenue from your existing customers. Thank you all. Have a great day. Bye now.
Thank you.